The trifecta has been completed as Sony has officially joined Microsoft and Nintendo in an unfortunate new trend. It's Sunday, so let's get sensational. I'm Mike, and I'm back to talk about the gaming news. And I'm actually back this time because if you happen to notice, there was no video last week, and that was simply because there weren't really any big stories, so I didn't want to put out what I felt like would have been a filler video. So in case you were wondering, that's why nothing released last week. This week, however, we got a bunch of stuff to talk about, including the new price of the PS5. So it's not really surprising at this point, but due to the whole tariff situation in the US, both Microsoft and Nintendo raised prices of their consoles. Xbox raised prices across the Xbox Series line, and then more recently, Nintendo raised the prices of the Switch 1 and some of the accessories, but not the Switch 2. Sony was basically the only one left who hadn't done any kind of price adjustment yet, but that all changed on August 21st. So Sony announced that they've raised the price of the PS5 in the US by $50 across all their models. So the PS5 digital went from $450 to $500, the disc-based PS5 went from $500 to $550, and the Pro went from $700 to $750. Now this isn't as large of a price increase as we saw with the Xbox, where it went up $80 to $100 depending on the model. Of course, both the PS5 and the Xbox already had price increases in other countries previously, like over the last 2 years, so it's not anything new with this generation for both of them to do price increases. It's just the first time that they've increased the prices in the US. But basically at this point, all three console makers have done some kind of increase. But now with Sony joining the price increase party in the US, the odd one out now was Nintendo, in that they only increased the price of their last-gen console and not the current one. But depending on how the whole tariff situation goes, I wouldn't expect that to always be the case. But while we're on the topic of Nintendo and the Switch 2, it looks like they're getting more big third-party games on the console courtesy of Xbox. So during Gamescom, Microsoft announced that Indiana Jones will be coming to the Switch 2 in 2026. Now they didn't give an exact release date or release window, but I think this will be an interesting port because it's a somewhat more recent game and graphically intensive, so I'm wondering how the Switch 2 version will run. But while Indiana Jones was officially announced, a rumor came out about another Microsoft game potentially coming to the Switch 2, and that is Starfield. So Nate the Hate is reporting that Starfield will also be making its way to Switch 2 in 2026. Now with Starfield, there was a previous rumor that it's going to be hitting PS5 in spring of 2026, but that hasn't been officially announced by Microsoft either. So right now, this is definitely in the rumor territory. But being that it is a Bethesda game and they're really known for putting their games on basically every platform, including the Amazon Echo, I could see this happening. Now, like I mentioned earlier with Indiana Jones, we don't know how these games will perform on the Switch 2, because aside from Cyberpunk, we really haven't seen a lot of third-party games that push the system to its limits. Well, Elden Ring is supposed to release soon, and apparently they had a demo of the game at Gamescom running on the Switch 2, and the feedback on it wasn't great. So it's being reported that the Elden Ring demo at Gamescom has some major frame rate issues. Graphics wise, it's being reported that it doesn't look as good as the other console versions of the game, but it overall looked really good. But the main issue was the frame rate, as it was reported to have dropped as low as 15 frames per second in handheld mode. Now, no footage exists of this because Namco Bandai didn't allow any recording, so yeah, that's not a great sign either. I will say, looking at games like Cyberpunk, as well as something like WWE 2K25, which the last mainline 2K wrestling game on the Switch 1 was a complete disaster. So it seems like the system is capable, so this may just be an optimization issue on Namco Bandai's part. Either way, we'll see how Indiana Jones runs on the Switch 2, if the Starfield rumor is true, and if Namco Bandai gets their shit together before launch. I meant to say ish. But while the jury is still out on Nintendo's third-party games on the Switch 2, Nintendo's first-party games tend to run pretty well when they actually come out. And there is one game we're still waiting on to come out, and that is Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. So the last time we talked about Metroid Prime 4, it had been rated in South Korea, which typically means it's going to release soon. Right now, it just has a release date of 2025, and like I previously mentioned, we're quickly running out of 2025. Well, it looks like it may be inching even closer to release, as the ESRB has now rated Metroid Prime 4, and as expected, it has a T rating. Wait, why does Nintendo's page say untested compatibility for the Switch 2? Didn't they market this as Switch 2 Enhanced? Anyway, I'd like to reiterate, the reason that I'm reporting on this is because A, the Switch 2 needs games, and this could be a big release for it, and it being rated means that it's probably going to finally release soon. And B, I have an extremely thirsty friend who's been waiting since 2017, and I believe his life is in danger if this game doesn't finally release this year. I'm not sure why Nintendo has been so reluctant to give it a release date, especially after showcasing it during the Switch 2 reveal, but maybe they're just waiting to have it as their big holiday release for the year. But unfortunately, Metroid Prime 4 has officially lost the race though. I mentioned in the last video that Metroid Prime 4 was in a race with the ROG Xbox Ally to see which one gets a release date first. And that release date is what we're talking about today in our final story. So the ROG Xbox Ally and the ROG Xbox Ally X, I can't do these names today, I'm sorry. So the Xbox Handhelds officially got their release date at Gamescom. I covered the rumor a couple weeks ago that the Xbox Ally would be released on October 16th, and that would be announced at Gamescom, and that all ended up being true. So the ROG Xbox Ally and Ally X will be releasing on October 16th with the price of, we don't know yet because they haven't announced it. So I mentioned in the rumor video that we should get pricing when they make this announcement, because part of the rumor was that the pre-orders are going to go live after they made the announcement, which would make sense because October 16th isn't like super far away. However, Microsoft and Asus have still not committed to a price just yet. IGN interviewed Jason Ronald, the vice president of Xbox Gaming Devices and Ecosystem, and he basically said that they want to find the right balance between affordability and price point. And he goes on to mention the challenging macroeconomic environment, aka the whole tariff situation. So I'll give them a pass on not releasing the price just yet, just because of this whole weird situation. My guess is that Microsoft probably wanted to make it more affordable than the original ROG Ally and Ally X, especially with this being branded as an Xbox handheld. But given that they just did huge price increases across the Xbox line, I doubt that's going to be the case anymore. On the bright side, from the articles I saw where people had hands-on with it, it seems like the redesigned Windows ran really well and was easy to use, so that's at least some good news. Of course, there's still the question of how well it responds to things like waking up from sleep and Windows updates, which have been my main issues with Windows handhelds in the past. And while we're on the topic of the new Windows, it also seems like Microsoft is borrowing some ideas from Valve and the Steam Deck, as they also announced a compatibility program for their handhelds. So Microsoft is going to have badges on games to indicate their compatibility, similar to what Steam Deck does with the Steam Deck Verified badge. So they're going to have two badges. One is handheld optimized, which means it has full controller support and will run at the correct resolution and settings for the handheld. The second badge is mostly compatible, which means it works, but it may require some additional settings changes. They're also going to have two performance indicators. One is should play great, which means it should run at 60 frames per second or above, and should play well, which means it should run at 30 frames per second. I think they should have different language for those because plays great and plays well just feel really similar, like almost the same thing. But either way, from a software standpoint, it looks like they're doing a lot to make this version of Windows more handheld friendly. Now, personally, I'm sticking with my OG, triple OG, ROG Ally and will not be buying either of the new handhelds, but I do hope the new version of Windows has an option for the older Asus handhelds as well. But let me know how you feel down in the comments. Where do you think Microsoft will land price-wise? And how do you feel about the handheld overall? Is it something that you would consider buying? And if so, what price would it need to be? Again, let me know down below. And if you enjoyed this video, then make sure to tell a friend, tell a coworker, like, share, and subscribe, and hit that bell notification button thing to be notified when I drop a video or a live stream. And I always do at least two things at the same time. Peace.